Pentecost is the Greek name for Shavuot, the Feast of Weeks, a prominent feast in the calendar of ancient Israel celebrating the giving of the law to Moses at Sinai. In Christianity, Pentecost is celebrated 50 days after Easter Sunday, inclusively, hence its name. In Judaism, Shavuot is on the 6th day of the Hebrew month of Sivan. Pentecost falls on the 10th day after Ascension Thursday. The feast is also called White Sunday, or Whit Sunday, especially in the United Kingdom, where traditionally the next day, Whit Monday, was also a public holiday. In Eastern Christianity, Pentecost can also refer to the entire 50 days between Easter and Pentecost. Hence the book containing the liturgical texts for Paschaltide is called the Pentecosterion. In the New Testament, Pentecost was the occasion of the descent of the Holy Spirit upon the apostles and other followers of Jesus Christ, as described in the Acts of the Apostles 2-1-31, and therefore in the Christian liturgical year, it became a feast commemorating this occasion. For this reason, Pentecost is described by some Christians as the birthday of the Church. The Pentecostal movement of Christianity derives its name from this New Testament event, as the movement emphasizes direct personal experience with God, akin to the descent of the Holy Spirit upon the apostles. Old Testament. Pentecost is the Old Greek and Latin name for the Jewish festival of weeks, which can be found in the Hebrew Bible. Shavuot, called the Festival of Weeks in Exodus chapter 34 verse 22 and Deuteronomy chapter 16 verse 10, is also called the Festival of Reaping in Exodus chapter 23 verse 16, and Day of the First Fruits in Numbers chapter 28 verse 26. The reading of the Book of Ruth is traditionally done in Jewish tradition at Pentecost, which links with the grain harvest theme of the festival. Extra-biblical and post-biblical Jewish texts. The Talmud refers to Shavuot as Atzaret, referring to the prohibition against work on this holiday and to the conclusion of the holiday and season of Passover. Since Shavuot occurs 49 days after the first day of Passover, Hellenistic Jews gave it the name Pentecost. According to Jewish tradition, Pentecost commemorates God's giving of the Ten Commandments at Mount Sinai, 49 days after the Exodus. The Talmud derives this from a calculation based on biblical texts. There is a Jewish tradition that King David was born and died at Pentecost. In the Apostle Peter's first sermon, recorded in Acts chapter 2 verses 14-39, he linked the life, death and ascension of Jesus to King David's death, burial and hope of immortality. New Testament. The biblical narrative of Pentecost is given in the second chapter of the book of Acts. Present were about 120 followers of Christ, including the 12 apostles, his mother Mary, various other women disciples and his brothers. Their reception of the Holy Spirit in the upper room is recounted in Acts chapter 2 verses 1-6. And when the day of Pentecost was fully come, they were all with one accord in one place. And suddenly there came a sound from heaven as of a rushing mighty wind, and it filled all the house where they were sitting. And there appeared unto them cloven tongues like as of fire, and it sat upon each of them. And they were all filled with the Holy Spirit, and began to speak with other languages, as the Spirit gave them utterance. And there were dwelling at Jerusalem Jews, devout men, out of every nation under heaven. Now when this was noised abroad, the multitude came together, and were confounded, because that every man heard them speak in his own language, while those on whom the Spirit had descended were speaking in many languages. The Apostle Peter stood up with the 11 and proclaimed to the crowd that this event was the fulfillment of the prophecy. In Acts chapter 2 verse 17, it reads, "And in the last days, God says, I will pour out my Spirit upon every sort of flesh. And your sons and your daughters will prophesy, and your young men will see visions, and your old men will dream dreams." He also mentions that it was the third hour of the day. Acts chapter 2 verse 41 then reports, "Then they that gladly received his word were baptized. and the same day there were added unto them about 3,000 souls. Peter stated that this event was the beginning of a continual outpouring that would be available to all believers from that point on, Jews and Gentiles alike. Location of the first Pentecost. Traditional interpretation holds that the descent of the Holy Spirit took place in the upper room, or cenacle, while celebrating the day of Pentecost. The upper room was first mentioned in Luke chapter 22 verses 12 to 13. This upper room was to be the location of the Last Supper and the institution of Holy Communion. The next mention of an upper room is in Acts chapter 1 verses 13 to 14, the continuation of the Luke narrative, authored by the same biblical writer. Here the disciples and women wait, and they gave themselves up to constant prayer. And when they were come in, they went up into an upper room, where abode both Peter, and James, and John, and Andrew, Philip, and Thomas, Bartholomew, and Matthew, James the son of Alphaeus, and Simon Zelotes, and Judas the brother of James. These all continued with one accord in prayer and supplication, with the women, and Mary the mother of Jesus, and with his brethren. Then, in Acts chapter 2 verses 1 to 2, and when the day of Pentecost was fully come, they were all with one accord in one place. And suddenly there came a sound from heaven as of a rushing mighty wind, and it filled all the house where they were sitting. They refers to the aforementioned disciples, and it includes the women. The place referring to the same upper room where these persons had continued with one accord in prayer and supplication. Date. According to the current Jewish calendar, the date of Pentecost is 50 days from Passover. In Jewish antiquity, dates were disputed, as in the Dead Sea Scrolls or in the Mishnah. In Christian tradition, Pentecost is part of the movable cycle of the ecclesiastical year. According to Christian tradition, Pentecost is always 7 weeks after Easter Sunday, that is to say, 50 days after Easter. In other words, it falls on the 8th Sunday, counting Easter Day. The date of Easter may be calculated using a procedure known as computus. Since the date of Easter is calculated differently in the East and West, in most years the two traditions celebrate Pentecost on different days. In the West, the earliest possible date is May 10th, and the latest possible date June 13th. In the East, this range of possible dates presently corresponds from May 23rd to June 26th on the Gregorian calendar.